November 25, 1942, at the edge of the Tunisian desert, late afternoon. The sun hangs low, distorted by heat ripples rising off the sand. Dust floats in the air like powdered gold, and somewhere beneath that haze, a pair of German field glasses catch the light. Afrika Korps Hauptmann Erich Voss steadying his elbows on a jagged rock, peering across a dead-flat valley floor. He's been watching the same strange dust plume for nearly 5 minutes. At first, he thinks it's just another British supply convoy, thin-skinned trucks, maybe a few light tanks, easy prey. But as the plume grows, he senses something heavier moving beneath it, something deliberate, something American. Voss lowers the binoculars, squints, then looks again. Another officer steps up beside him, Oberleutnant Karl Brenner, broad-shouldered, sunburned, sweat darkening the collar of his tropical tunic. "Shermans," Brenner mutters, "more of those toys." The word toys drips with contempt. It's a joke they've repeated since the first captured reports arrived. The Americans are sending children's tanks to a man's war. Too tall, too lightly armored, a ridiculous silhouette that any Panzer III could punch straight through. For months, the Afrika Korps has scoffed at the M4. Unproven, undergunned, laughable. And yet, the ground beneath their boots trembles ever so slightly, a deep, rhythmic vibration, the kind that doesn't come from one tank, but many. Voss lifts the field glasses again. Dust clears, just enough. And there it is, a line of M4 Shermans creeping out of the heat shimmer, broad hulls angled toward the ridge, 75mm guns steady, antenna swaying, treads grinding forward with slow mechanical confidence. Not 2, not 5, dozens. The valley seems to move with them. Brenner laughs, but it's an uneasy sound. Americans and their mass production, they just don't know when to stop. He tries to sound amused, but you can hear the strain underneath, because even if the Sherman is flawed, 50 flawed tanks are still 50 tanks, and the Afrika Korps is running low on fuel, low on ammunition, low on everything except heat and dust. Behind Voss, a radio operator adjusts the long whip antenna, trying to catch a signal from Divisional HQ. All he gets is static. The British have been jamming the airwaves all morning. The desert feels strangely silent. Too silent. Down in the valley, the Shermans tighten formation. Their commanders pop from the hatches, goggles on, bandanas tied, sun glinting off their helmets. They look young, determined, like men with a mission they believe in. Voss feels something he hates, uncertainty. Because these toy tanks, they're moving like they belong here. He hands the field glasses to Brenner. "Count them," Voss says quietly. Brenner doesn't answer for several seconds. Then he whispers, "I can't. There are too many." A cold gust of wind sweeps across the ridge, lifting a curl of sand. It stings Voss's cheek. The desert is shifting, changing mood, changing shape, changing fate. The Shermans fan out, one platoon peeling left, another right. A dust curtain rises behind them like a storm wall. Sunlight flashes off their tracks in short, hard sparks. The Afrika Korps officers stare, the same joke caught in their throats, because suddenly it's not funny. Not at all. From behind the Shermans, more vehicles appear, half-tracks, trucks, fuel carriers, an entire armored column flowing forward like a steel river, the kind of mobility Germany once prided itself on and can no longer match. Brenner finally speaks. "That's impossible," he murmurs. "We hit their supply lines last week. How can they still advance like this?" Voss doesn't answer, because he already knows. The rumors were true. The Americans don't fight like the Europeans. They don't worry about shortages. They don't ration steel like it's gold. They don't slow down for anything. They simply replace whatever is lost and keep coming. A runner approaches, boots kicking sand, breath sharp. Hauptmann, orders from battalion, hold the ridge, delay them as long as possible. Voss feels his stomach tighten. Delay against that? The Shermans continue forward, their engines rumbling like thunder building over the horizon. A strange, unsettling thought slips into his mind. This isn't a toy. This is a factory-made avalanche, and it's heading straight for them. Voss grips his map case tighter. The desert wind gusts harder, and for the first time in the North African campaign, he wonders whether the Afrika Korps has finally met something it cannot outmaneuver, something it cannot outfight, something it cannot stop. The first Sherman turret turns, slowly, deliberately, toward the ridge. The barrel locks onto their position. Voss's breath catches, because in that moment he understands what this really is. Not just an attack, a message. And the message is simple. America has arrived. The mockery starts to crack. The first muzzle flash comes from somewhere down the American line, small, distant, almost harmless looking. A puff of dust jumps near the ridge, then another. The next round lands close enough that Voss can hear the metallic snap as shrapnel flicks off a nearby rock.
"Artillery spotting," Brenner mutters, trying to sound unfazed. "They're testing range." But there's a tremor in his voice. The two officers crouch lower behind the outcropping as the Shermans continue rolling forward, line by line, like waves pressing onto a beach. Their formation is almost unnervingly clean. Not the cautious, slow crawl of a British armored column, not the aggressive spear-point thrust of German panzers. This is something else. Methodical, heavy, relentless. Behind them, mechanics work frantically around a pair of German Panzer IIIs, one tank crew checking the drive sprocket, another hammering the fender back into place. The vehicles look tired, dented, sun-faded. The desert has worn them down. Supply shortages have worn them down even more. You can almost feel the difference, one side fighting to keep its machines alive, the other sending fresh machines faster than they can be destroyed. Voss watches as a single Panzer III growls forward to take a better firing angle. Its engine coughs once, twice, before settling into a rattling idle. An omen, maybe. "Forward gun team!" someone shouts behind him. A mortar crew drops into position, scrambling to sight in. Sweat beads on their foreheads. The air is hot enough to distort their outlines. Brenner leans close, lowering his voice as if afraid the Americans might hear him from half a kilometer away. This can't be all from one division. No one moves armor this fast. Voss knows better. It's the Americans. They're not fighting with one division. They're fighting with Detroit. As if summoned by the word, the Shermans begin to accelerate. The movement is sudden, engines revving in unison, dust exploding beneath their tracks. A line of them surges toward a low ridge across the valley, using it as cover. Another line angles right, cutting off a possible German retreat. The coordination is tight, almost rehearsed. German mockery begins to meet German mathematics, and the numbers look bad. A thunderous crack splits the air. One of the Panzer IIIs fires its 50-millimeter gun, smoke spitting from the barrel. The shell streaks across the valley, slams into the lead Sherman, and glances off in a shower of sparks. The tank barely shudders. Brenner swears under his breath. That should have gone through. Another German gun fires. Another shell ricochets. The Shermans don't slow. Their armor, sloped, polished by the desert dust, deflects round after round. The Africa Corps officers exchange a look neither wants to acknowledge. This is new. This is not how the story was supposed to go. Down the valley, the Shermans crest the low ridge, their silhouettes sharp against the sun. For a moment they appear almost silhouetted, ghosts rising from the shimmering heat. Their guns depress in eerie unison. The first American round strikes like a hammer blow. A Panzer III erupts in smoke, its track blown off, hull cracking open. The crew spills out, diving into the sand as fire catches the engine. The mortarmen flinch. Even Voss feels the concussion vibrate in his ribs. A second American round lands, then a third. Within seconds, the valley's quiet tension explodes into a full mechanized firefight, engines roaring, shells shrieking, dust rising like a storm front. Voices shout orders, radios crackle with static and panic. The desert becomes a whirlwind of heat and iron. Brenner grips his binoculars so tightly his knuckles turn white. "They shouldn't be firing this fast," he mutters. "How are they—" But he doesn't finish the sentence, because the truth is rolling toward him in plain view. The Shermans aren't just machines, they're systems. Each tank moves in coordination with the next. A damaged one pulls back, another instantly fills its place. Fuel trucks and ammunition carriers appear behind them, brazenly close to the front line, protected by the sheer mass of armor ahead. In Germany, such positioning would be suicidal. In America's desert campaign, it's routine. Voss finally speaks, quiet, measured. This is how they plan to fight, not with brilliance, not with finesse. He points to the armored wave cresting across the sand, with volume. A mortar shell whistles overhead. German infantry hunker down behind jagged limestone. Sand sprays into the air as explosions walk closer. The Shermans continue climbing the ridge, treads grinding, engines howling. Their turrets rotate again, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Brenner draws a shaky breath. "Eric," he whispers, "if they have this many here, how many more do they have behind that?" Voss doesn't answer, because somewhere deep inside, buried beneath the desert heat and the denial and the bravado, he already knows. This isn't the peak of American armor. This is the beginning. A runner suddenly arrives, breathless, desperate. "Hauptmann, command says hold at all costs. Reinforcements are—" He stops mid-sentence as another Sherman crests the ridge. Its gun swings toward them. The runner's eyes widen. For a heartbeat, no one moves. Then Voss shouts, "Down!" A blast of white smoke erupts. The impact hits the rocks in front of them like a sledgehammer. Debris rains across the ridge. Men hit the ground. The sand beneath their palms is hot, too hot. When Voss looks up through the swirling dust, the Shermans are closer than ever. And for the first time since the war began, he feels something he hasn't felt on any battlefield. Not confusion, not frustration, but a hollow, sinking certainty. The mockery, the jokes, the arrogance, it's all slipping away, crushed under the weight of American steel. When the toy tank became a storm. The ridge is shaking now, small tremors at first, then rolling vibrations strong enough to rattle loose stones down the slope. Voss and Brenner crawl to a lower shelf of rock, staying below the silhouetted crest. The air is thick with drifting sand and the metallic taste of cordite. Somewhere behind them, a medic shouts for bandages. A wounded loader cries out in pain. A Panzer III burns fiercely on the valley floor, smoke spiraling upward in oily black columns. But the sounds feel distant, drowned out by one overwhelming presence: the Shermans. They advance the way a storm front rolls across open plains, slow, implacable, inevitable. You can hear it before you see it, the grind of tracks chewed by sand, the hum of engines tuned to a single, unified rhythm. Not perfect machines, just enough machines, enough to keep coming. A German anti-tank gun crew sets up 30 meters down the ridge, ramming a shell into the breach. Their faces are tight with concentration, jaws clenched. They have one job: stop the advance. The gun booms. Its recoil shakes the ground. The shell streaks into the side of the Sherman, hitting the turret ring. Another shower of sparks. The tank turns, almost offended, and swings its 75mm gun toward them. "Move! Get down!" Voss barks, but the gun fires faster. The explosion blows the AT position apart, flinging men backward. Sand erupts like a geyser. When the dust clears, the AT gun is nothing but twisted metal. Brenner exhales through his teeth. This is madness, absolute madness. Not madness, Voss says quietly. Math. Behind the lead Shermans, the second wave spreads out, another dozen tanks moving in staggered formation. American half-tracks follow close behind them, brazenly close to the front line, protected by the sheer mass of armor ahead. In Germany, such positioning would be suicidal. In America's desert campaign, it's routine. The Americans know what they're doing. They've built a war machine designed not just to win battles, but to overwhelm every battlefield it enters.
The Africa Corps cannot believe what they're seeing. Supply convoys this close to the front? Visible? Unarmored? It violates every rule of desert warfare. But it works, because American armor has one advantage Rommel no longer has: unbreakable, uninterrupted lifelines. Voss watches a second Panzer III try to reposition, its driver pushing the worn engine to its limit. The tank sputters, jerks, then stalls altogether. The crew bails out in frustration, cursing as they scramble for cover. He feels a flash of anger, not at them, at fate. "Look at them," Brenner murmurs. "Fresh tracks, fresh engines, fresh crews. They fight today like they'll fight tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that." He wipes sweat from his brow. "And we're dying of shortages." A distant thump echoes across the valley, American artillery firing from far beyond sight. The shells land with terrifying accuracy, walking up the slope toward the ridge. Voss grips the edge of the rocks as one explosion sends a shockwave rolling over him. The air becomes heat and pressure and sand. His ears ring. Then, beneath the chaos, he hears something new. Machine guns. Not German MG-34s, American Brownings, spraying long bursts that rake the foothills. Infantry scrambles for foxholes. The machine gun fire forces heads down, trapping German troops in place just as the Shermans press forward. This is no careless push. It's a synchronized assault. The kind Germany once executed with surgical precision, but can no longer afford. Voss wipes grit from his eyes and looks again across the valley. More Shermans appear, then more. The horizon seems to ripple with armor, heat shimmering around the edges, making them look almost unreal, like mirages. Only mirages don't fire high-velocity shells. Brenner swallows. 30? 40? More, Voss says, and that's just this valley. You think there are others? Yes. His tone leaves no room for doubt. A distant American radio crackles through one of the captured frequencies, voices calm, controlled, calling out coordinates, adjusting formations. No panic, no confusion. Confidence. German radios, by contrast, are chaos, broken transmissions, frantic updates, officers yelling to be heard over static. Another shell booms close enough to knock Voss sideways. He catches himself on a rock, coughing. Sand sticks to his teeth. Below them, an American tank commander raises a hand, pointing toward the ridge. Several Shermans adjust instantly, angling their guns upward. Brenner pulls Voss down behind the rocks, just as 3 rounds hit where they'd been seconds earlier, obliterating the outcrop. Chunks of rock rain down like hail. The ridge shakes again. "This position won't hold," Brenner gasps. "No," Voss says, forcing himself to stay level. "But we have no orders to fall back." Another explosion rolls across the ridge. For a moment, the desert is nothing but smoke and heat and deafening sound. When the air clears, Voss peers over the shattered rocks and freezes. The American tanks have reached the base of the ridge. Up close, they look enormous. Their tracks claw into the sand. Their guns pivot with slow, terrifying confidence. Their hulls are coated in dust, but otherwise unscarred. Not toys, not jokes, no. Tools of an industrial empire. Brenner whispers what both men have been thinking, but trying not to say. Eric, if this is just one column, then Germany can't win this. Voss doesn't disagree, because the truth is now rumbling beneath their boots. American steel, American fuel, American factories, all pressing into the desert with a force Europe has never seen. And the Africa Corps is about to be swallowed whole. Suddenly, an officer down the line shouts, "Sherman platoons flanking left! They're cutting off the escape route!" Voss feels his throat tighten. The trap is closing. What he doesn't yet know, what no German on that ridge knows, is that this is only the first wave. The air seems to vibrate as the Shermans split into two columns, one continuing straight toward the ridge, while the other sweeps wide, kicking up a massive dust arc. It's a maneuver the Africa Corps has used countless times, hooking around an enemy position to cut off retreat. But seeing Americans execute it, and with this many tanks, hits like a punch to the chest. A sergeant crawls up the rocks towards Voss and Brenner, helmet dented, uniform streaked with soot. He's shouting, but the ringing in Voss's ears turns his words into muffled noise. Only when the sergeant grabs Brenner's shoulder does the voice sharpen. "They're encircling us. Panzer group says we're to hold until sundown, then withdraw to fallback grid 87. Brenner stares at him like he's just heard a death sentence. "Sundown? That's 4 hours from now." "Those are the orders."
The sergeant scrambles back down toward the gun pits, but halfway there, a mortar shell detonates, throwing him forward. Smoke swallows him. No time to check if he survived. Voss clenches his teeth and forces himself to stand. His legs protest, shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. Below, the American formation continues its slow-motion pincer movement, like a tightening jaw. A single Panzer IV, still operational, fires around. The shell slams into the glacis of a Sherman with a loud clang, no penetration. The Sherman retaliates instantly, its 75mm gun barking fire. The Panzer IV's turret erupts in a blast of flame, smoke pouring skyward. The crew bolts from the hatches, faces blackened, stumbling through the sand as machine gun fire snaps at their heels. Voss watches them run and feels something cold settle inside him. This is not maneuver warfare anymore. This is not two masters of desert tactics testing each other's wits. This is a wall, an industrial tidal wave crashing against men who are running out of tools to stop it. A runner approaches from the left flank, breath ragged, uniform flapping as he climbs. "Hauptmann, left is collapsing. They're pushing through the Italian positions." "How far?" Voss demands. The runner hesitates. Then, "They're running." Voss closes his eyes. The truth is simple. This ridge is dying in pieces. He looks out again at the Shermans. Sunlight hits one turret just right, making the edges glow. Another tank commander signals with a gloved hand, quick, crisp, almost effortless. The American infantry behind them moves in tight formations, using the tanks as moving shields, advancing with confidence the Africa Corps remembers from its own peak. But that peak was months ago, and it has never come back. Brenner breaks the silence. "Do you remember what Captain Maurer said in February when we heard the Americans were sending tanks?" Voss nods. "He said they were poorly trained, poorly armed, and poorly made." Brenner laughs without humor. "He wasn't wrong.
Not at first. A Sherman fires another shot. Another explosion shakes the ridge. Sand pours down the slope like water. Voss watches the American column enlarge as more tanks crest a distant dune, a third wave. Do they ever stop coming? That tank down there, Brenner says, pointing to a Sherman with extra track links welded to its hull, couldn't outgun a Panzer IV in a fair fight. No, Voss agrees, but this isn't a fair fight. A strange, distant roar rises on the far horizon. At first it blends with the battle noise, indistinguishable. Then it sharpens. Multiple engines, high revs, wide formation. Brenner's eyes narrow. Are those? Before he finishes, a swarm of American fighter bombers drops into view. P-40 Warhawks and A-20 Havocs, flying low, noses angled downward. Their presence hits like a gut punch. Air support. Real, coordinated, plentiful air support. The desert floor flashes with explosions as their bombs fall. Shermans on the ground surge forward with renewed confidence, as if the sky itself approves their assault. The Afrika Korps duck, covering their heads as the air attack hammers the rear supply lines and reserve positions. Trucks flip from concussive blasts. Ammunition dumps erupt in fierce fireballs. Brenner shouts over the chaos. Why would they commit air support here, on this ridge? We're not even the main line. Voss wipes dust from his eyes, though it only smears. Because this isn't about terrain, he says. He looks one last time at the perfect machine of American coordination. The tanks, the infantry, the air, the endless supply trucks, the confidence of a nation that hasn't been bombed to rubble, a country whose factories run without fear. This is about proving something, Voss says quietly. To us, to themselves, to the world. Another explosion shakes the ridge. The sky turns brown with sand and smoke. Brenner grabs Voss's sleeve. What are they proving? Voss answers without looking away from the advancing Shermans.
That the Americans can fight a mechanized war, and they can do it on a scale we can't match. A shell lands so close that both officers are thrown backward onto the rocks. When they regain their bearings, the Shermans are nearly at the ridge base. Weapons reload, engines roar, the noose draws tighter. Between blasts, Brenner leans close and whispers the fear they both now carry. If this is their first real push, what happens when they send everything? Voss doesn't answer, because deep down, beneath the desert heat and smoke and pride and denial, he already knows. The campaign is shifting. Africa is slipping. Germany's war machine is being outbuilt, outfueled, outnumbered. And the toy tank they mocked is about to crush the ridge beneath its treads. The moment the toy hit back. Focus. The first real shock to the Afrika Korps when massed Shermans finally arrived and the joke stopped being funny. The first shells screamed in just before dawn. It was April 1943, on the blistered approaches to Hill 609, a ridge the Germans considered untouchable, the kind of terrain where Allied armor usually died in smoking rows. The Luftwaffe pilots flying over the line that morning reported something strange on the valley floor, long armored columns where there shouldn't have been any. Rommel's officers dismissed it at first, another misidentification, another batch of Stuarts or half-tracks, nothing to worry about. But as the sun crept over the ridge, the silhouettes became unmistakable. Broad turrets, long tracks, that high, boxy hull. M4 Shermans. Not a handful, not a dozen, hundreds. They moved like a steel tide, engines growling, dust rising behind them like a sandstorm. The Germans on the ridge stared down through field glasses, expecting to see chaos, broken down transmissions, misaligned suspensions, engines coughing out, the usual. That's when the real surprise hit. They kept coming. Sherman after Sherman rolled forward in perfect order, forming a battle line so wide that Oberlieutenant Kurt Streicher muttered under his breath, "Mein Gott, how many of them are there?" You could hear the nervous shifting along the ridge. Even seasoned veterans of the Africa Corps, men who'd stared down British Crusaders and American Stuarts, felt the first curl of unease, because quantity had a sound, a feeling, a pressure, and this was overwhelming. Artillery opened up first. German 88s spat fire from concealed pits, shells tearing into the lead ranks. One Sherman erupted in a flame column, then another, but the line didn't stop. If anything, the rest accelerated, engines roaring as they closed the distance. A panicked radio call crackled across Africa Corps frequencies. "They're still advancing. They're not breaking formation." Rommel's doctrine prized mobility, precision, and ambush. But these Shermans, this ocean of American steel, moved with a different kind of power. Relentless, mechanical persistence. When one fell burning, two more drove past it. And suddenly, the Germans realized something they had never truly believed before. These tanks didn't need to be individually superior. They just needed to keep coming. Down on the valley floor, American tank commander Lieutenant Jack Shea kicked the radio pedal and shouted orders. His crew was half-deaf from artillery concussion, their Sherman vibrating with every impact. Machine gun fire rattled against the hull like hail.
But the tank kept running. That was the point. You could almost feel the tension inside the German gun pits as American armor crossed the halfway mark. The 88s couldn't kill fast enough. The Panzer III crews saw the dust cloud closing in and scrambled to reposition. And then something happened that no one in the Africa Corps expected. The Shermans began to flank. Dozens of them peeled outward, forming a crescent maneuver straight out of American armored doctrine manuals. It was impossible. No tank unit should have been able to coordinate like that under fire. But with radios in every turret and overwhelming numbers, the Americans made it look effortless. The Africa Corps officers watched in disbelief. This wasn't a toy. This wasn't a joke. This was a machine designed for one purpose: break the line through persistence. Rommel's men had laughed at American industry. They had mocked the Sherman as cheap, simplistic, mass-produced trash. Now they were watching that same mass production sweep across the valley like a mechanized tidal wave. One more 88 fired, direct hit. A Sherman's turret blew off, spinning skyward like a coin flipped by a giant. But even that didn't slow the advance. In the German command post dug under the ridge, a radio operator turned pale as he listened to field reports stacking up, the same phrase repeating in different terrified voices. "Wir können sie nicht aufhalten." We can't stop them. Outside, the sun was fully up now, painting the desert gold as more Shermans crested the far ridge, their silhouettes multiplying until they blurred into a single massive shape. The moment the Africa Corps truly understood what they were facing wasn't when the first Sherman appeared. It was when they realized the line of Shermans had no end. And on that ridge, for the first time in the entire campaign, the Germans felt something they had never felt in North Africa. Outnumbered, outmatched, overwhelmed. And this was only the beginning of the shock that would spread all the way to Rommel himself.